Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Yes, welcome back to... Yes. Welcome back to Bench Opinions. This is the Leftovers episode, and it is the first episode this week because of the massive occurrences over the weekend in regards to particularly golf, and we wanted to make sure that we shared our thoughts in the moment.
Yeah, get out early.
Straight off the bat.
I mean, the world also wanted our thoughts very quickly, so we thought let's lead with that.
Exactly. Small little event over the weekend called the Masters. And
tiny.
Don't know about you. I'm quite tired today because I think all three of us watched it until the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah.
But honestly, I early on in the day, I thought I might struggle to keep my eyes open. There was not a second where I was like, I don't know if I can stay up. It was... What is Klaus saying?
No.
Klaus, would you like to tell us how you felt?
I think I essentially was Rory McIlroy's
good luck charm.
Personal good luck charm, because the 2 holes that I fell asleep, or the 3 holes that I fell asleep through, he double bogeyed, and bogeyed.
Yeah. Klaus says when McIlroy's like on the 12th, he's like, I'm going to have a power nap now. I was like, it's like 12:30.
I really wanted to be alert for the final holes.
Yeah.
I think before we get into Rory particularly and what that all means, I think let's look at a couple of the things that happened. First of all, time and time again, the Masters seems to just get better year by year. It really does. It seems to become hard to believe, but it becomes more of a spectacle, becomes more polished. It would be easy to think that something like the Masters might not be with the times, but it was unbelievable. The coverage, they had... This was the strongest presence they've ever had themselves on social media during the tournament as well. I don't know if anyone ever went onto the website, but when you went onto the website, you could click onto any players and literally see their last shot or a shot on any hole and follow their shots over a hole almost instantly, which was unbelievable. So crazy to see how the Masters just keeps growing and not even establishing itself, but becoming one of the biggest sporting events in the world. That's incredible. A couple of side shows. The whole Live Golf PGA Tour thing kind of continues to chug on a little bit, not as blatantly as was before, but this time 12 Live golfers playing, 7 of them making the cut. Bryson DeChambeau finishing tied 5th, and Patrick Reed right in the running as well, which is crazy. And a lot of people, four putted the 13th from nowhere. Which would have gotten him into the playoff as well. So interesting there to see how chug along. What are your feelings on like the Live Golf PGA thing? It definitely feels like it's calming down a little bit.
I think it's calmed down a lot, and it's not anymore like it's not a headline grabber anymore like it was a year or 2 years ago when it first started. Had a Live player won it, I think it would have been louder again. I think especially if Bryson had won it. With him being in negotiations about his contract, he probably could have asked for the world then. Because he's already hot property now. But it didn't. I thought there was a smaller storyline compared to a few others.
Yeah, it seemed like the competition was pretty balanced. Even though Rory went in with a decent lead, like it all evened out. And I mean, at one stage there was like 4 guys tied for first, I think. It was between Bryson, Rory, Rose, and Arberg or something.
Bryson was never tied for the lead. Thank goodness. But it was
Rose, Arberg, and
Rose,
Rory
Arberg, and McIlroy.
Yeah.
So like the competition was just so even, which is what makes it exciting, right? If you got one guy who runs away with it a little bit, then that's kind of where the magic gets lost.
And there was, I think, a point where like 4 or 5 of them were at 8 under as well in second place. So there was a lot of people in the hunt.
Then just a quick side note with Bethpage Black and the Ryder Cup coming up very soon. For long periods of the time, the top 3 names on the leaderboard, Europeans in Rose, McIlroy, and Arberg. I think that's also quite
very
telling.
Good. Even guys like Tyrrell Hatton and John Rahm. Well, Tyrrell Hatton more so. Played decently.
Sean Lowry had a couple of good rounds. The last one he really got
there's good signs for them, and also the tournaments leading up until now, Europeans have been very strong in them. So hopefully that continues. It's crazy for someone like Justin Rose, who you would have looked at the last Ryder Cup and been like, great servant, thank you for coming and being doing so well, to now come out of the Open and the Masters now as you have to take him.
Favorite.
You have to take him along. What he did yesterday,
10 birdies
and all over the weekend. Yeah,
10 birdies.
That's crazy
On that golf course. On the back nine, he only made one par, I think.
The guy shot.
It was just birdies and bogeys.
The guy shot 6 under with 4 bogeys on the card.
That's unreal.
Wild.
Yeah, and I think that was the last point I wanted to come to before we get to sort of Rory and all of the news around that, is that it is unbelievable. You know, you watch Full Swing, and he spoke in Full Swing already last year at the Open, saying he thinks he can still compete. You know, and what's incredible at 44, you know, he's never been the longest hitter in the world, but at 44, he's still he's maintained his distance for a long time, and he's so competitive. And I think it's not by chance that he's in the hunt in the Open and the Masters, because those are the two majors that aren't particularly sort of bomb.
It's not the US Open.
Bomb it and go, and point and shoot. So I think that's where he can definitely shine. But I mean, you know, you ask yourself, you know, this might have added another 5 years to his career, just knowing that he's in the hunt. Because I think that's the problem as well. I think as soon as doubt starts to creep into your game, whether you are competitive or not, I think that tends to sort of affect your performance and maybe your belief and the way you go about business off the course as well. But getting that close.
But I think especially with the Masters, the rest of your game has to be so on point. Your game management, your approach shots, your putting, and that's where he's just so consistent. Like his putting was unreal.
Yeah, and that's something that cost Bryson, because Bryson the first 3 days scrambled really well, but he all week struggled with this hook. Nick Faldo speaking a lot about how he believes that Bryson is the biggest thing in his arsenal is his length, but it also hinders him the most, because there's a lot of the times they're saying, dude, club down. Or club up.
To be fair, someone like Rory is now keeping up with him, distance-wise. He was out driving him on a few holes.
Exactly, but they were talking more about his iron play, for example, and a lot of the time he'll hit the lower, the higher, the number that he has to really pipe it with, as opposed to hitting shots, going up a club and that's what Rory did so well. Rory hit. I mean, we can get into his round now, but Rory's distance control on some of the shots, particularly shots like his approach at 15, that 7-iron around the trees.
That was unreal.
And even the 8-iron he hit at 17 as well. Yeah. He hit an 8-iron at 17 and he, that was the perfect club into those holes. And a lot of people saying that Bryson just always looks at the number and tries to hit the screws out of it.
He's a very strange cat in like how systematic and detailed he is about weird things in his game, right? When you went through that whole thing about telling you which dimple you had to hit a putt on and stuff like that, like he spends a lot of time on like some weird mechanics of the golf game. But
do you think some of that translates into like superstitions then? Becomes like a mental thing.
It probably does, because I think there is such a thing as overthinking it. But just on the distance thing, I actually had a thought when they were playing the playoff hole, because Rose hit a good drive as well, but Rose had an 8-iron in and Rory had a gap wedge in, and you saw Rose pitch. I think it must have been maybe a foot in front of the hole, and I think that is a sort of little bit of a difference in terms of like. Okay, in open play, Rory fucked up that gap wedge, but if you do have that extra bit of length and you can control a gap wedge rather than an 8-iron, maybe that is like the last little bit, because what Rose did throughout the day was splendid, but just in that moment to have like 60 yards more distance.
That definitely made the difference. I think it's, on the other hand, if you look at someone like Rose on that 18th playoff on the tee on the 18th for the playoff hole, Rose can hit his driver, not worrying about reaching those bunkers. Yeah. So that's another plus side to a certain degree. Sure. And I think execution still wins it for you. And the 2 shots that Rory hit, they were unreal. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, if Rose makes his putt.
That was what Klaus and I were also going through, because I was sitting there, I was more worried for Rory having to make a pressure putt because Rose had sunk a long one, because then you look at that putt and you're like, oh,
all of a sudden it's 15 feet. Yeah. Look, I think to just go focus on Rory a little bit more, and particularly his round, that was one of the most unbelievable spectacles in sport I've ever seen. Yeah. And I've watched a lot, but that day, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, he starts with a double and you think to yourself, here we go. After the round, he says, hey, actually, weirdly calmed my nerves to a certain degree because I was out there. And then looking back on his round, it definitely seemed like it did because he grew into the round really nicely. And if anything, after 10 holes, you're thinking he's going to cruise home.
And then that pressure just sort of,
slowly built, yeah.
When one mistake crept in, you could see like that pressure just sort of fucking crush him. Like it was so insane. And we were lying here and I was so nervous and so like tense. I was like, I don't know how he's dealing with this. I do not know.
Butch Harmon on commentary, who's one of the greatest golf teachers of all time, he was saying that it's also very interesting to see with Rory that he feels Rory's nerves directly translate into him tightening up.
Yeah.
So different people, obviously nerves can sort of hit you in different ways. But that Rory's biggest issue is that his nerves, even if he's not feeling them, it seems like it gets straight into his swing. And those become some of the shots he hit. The shot that he hit on 13, that third shot.
What did he have, 80 yards?
85 yards, I think it was. I genuinely believe, and we always, they always talk about what would an amateur do at Augusta. I think there's a lot can be said for any of the patrons in that crowd. You could have put a sandwich in their club and said, find the green anywhere left of that pin, and it's not going in the water. He literally hit it in the one spot you cannot hit it.
Did you hear his reasoning for it though? He says it was a little bit on an upslope, and he says quite often in that scenario it comes out right on him. It comes out left on him, which makes sense. And so he says he aimed a little bit further right, but it just stayed open completely. And it's like you said, it's sort of like, were you being a bit too cute then? Because maybe it was just trying to make par on a hole where, sure, you're supposed to make birdie, but you make birdie if you're chasing it, if you're getting it on for two.
I guess at the end of the day also you would have had plans going into the day. And I think your plan on that going into that day is trying to make birdie because it is people always say if you can play the par fives well at Augusta and you can keep big scores off your scorecard the rest of the round, that what win you Masters. And I think for Rory, I think throughout the week to make 4 doubles and still going on to win, it just shows the fight.
Crazy.
I mean, that shot he hit at 15 was stupid.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to touch on something that you said about his nerves, because they were showing a couple of highlights of the reactions of players in years gone by when they had won the Masters. Your Scotty Schefflers, your Tiger Woods, and so on and so forth. And all these guys were like jumping out of their boots, They were so excited. They were so happy. And when you look at Rory's reaction, complete just emotional collapse. He was finished. You could see he just wanted to go into the changing room and sit by himself and cry. Yeah. I didn't think not for a second did I think, man, this guy's super excited and super happy right now. Obviously he's happy, but it was just relief.
Yeah.
And all that emotion just released. And I think that goes into his gameplay where he's got all this pent up anxiety essentially.
Yeah. I mean, because it was going, unfortunately, it was literally playing out like the US Open from last year all over again. And you almost sit there as a fan and you're like, if he throws this one away as well, then...
Yeah, you ask yourself how he bounces
back. How do you
back.
bounce back from that?
A couple of small moments that was just spoken about afterwards is apparently when they walked off 18, his caddy turned to him and said, and his caddy's been getting a lot of criticism of late, saying that maybe it's time that they part ways, and they've been together since day one. Yeah. And his caddy actually looked at Rory as they walked off when they knew they were going off into the playoff and said, listen, we would have taken this at the beginning of the week.
Yeah, if you know at the beginning of the week you're going to be in a playoff to win.
And I think that is just it's these small strokes of genius in those times that cannot be spoken about enough, because I've always found the relationship between a caddy and a player very interesting. But back in the day, caddies were very much second-class citizens. But you do tend to feel like in the modern game now, when with caddies being able to sort of establish their own little reputations, that role is becoming even more and more vital. At least people know who Scotty Scheffler's caddy is, and they know who Justin Rose's caddy is.
It's becoming a team, right?
Yeah. So what an incredible thing to say. I mean, I just think to myself how hard it must be to know what to say.
Oh yeah,
and
for
to say
sure.
something like that, it must have played a massive role, because I was really worried for Rory with Rose. Rose was oozing confidence. I mean, he took his cap off before his final putt hit the
18.
bottom of the hole, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, if Rory gets into play with him, he's tickets. He's gone.
Yeah, for that drive to be in play and to be where it is was big for Rory, because I was worried that drive would go too far right.
He was terrible off the tee all day. Yeah.
Well, speaking of off the tee, I mean, the way that he started with both of his drives, which were arguably very good, and like he connected very nicely.
Inches.
I mean, the
Inches
chances
from
that you're
clearing
gonna
both of those
catch the lip of the bunker like that twice in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, that already puts the fear of God in you off the next tee shot, right?
Just want to touch on Bryson for a second, because it was pitted as mano a mano, Bryson versus Rory going into the final day, which I think most commentators and spectators knew you should never do at the Masters, because things can change so drastically on the final day. But that was a pretty big collapse by Bryson. That was like, you'd think that after going ahead on the second hole already, because Rory is in a tailspin, that he would just sort of take all that momentum and all of that. He was trying to gather a lot of energy from the crowd, high-fiving people, trying to be the charismatic guy that he is, and sort of feeding off that would just carry him through. But that just showed that Bryson wasn't the best golfer that week. It's like you said, he scrambled fantastically. And the day before, when he shot 69 was the best he was going to shoot. Whereas Rory's, I think, 66 the day before was almost the worst that he could have shot that day, because he was so good.
Yeah.
So the best player won, but Bryson was shown up.
Yeah, and look, I mean, in his defense, he turned to his caddy, I think, on 12 when he hooked his tee shot. I think he hooked it into the back bunker left.
Yeah.
And he turned to his caddy, and he was heard over the mic saying to his caddy, "I'm just playing badly today."
Yeah.
And I think it's, we hold people like him to such a high level, and I think that's what he wants. He wants to hold himself to that level too. I do think it's his style of golf is just it's a style that's going to come off, or it's not going to come off. And I don't think he's someone that's able to just keep himself in it. You know, that's what Justin Rose did so well. He just found a way to keep going. I know he made 10 birdies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I speak on the subject of Bryson afterwards, and again, a part of me, remember when Brooks and Bryson had that big beef at the time. A lot of people blamed it on the fans that it was sort of created and overhyped and whatever. Comment from Bryson in an interview afterwards, and it was a bit of fishing by the reporter. Yeah. The reporter asked him, "Hey, have you spoken to Rory yet? How's he doing? What's he saying?" And Bryson said, "No, he didn't talk to me once today." And then the reporter says, "Oh, but did you?" He's like, "No, he wouldn't talk to me."
Yeah.
And now it's blown up a little bit. People questioning
that.
Rory,
because it's what Tiger also did
that. But that's what I'm saying, And I'm not saying Bryson should protect Rory.
By not saying that.
Yeah, but for me it comes across as slightly bitter.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's disappointed. And it comes back to something we spoke about with Shane Lowry saying, "I just need half an hour."
Yeah.
I need a half an hour after rounds to just get a breather. And
because you can very easily, if someone asks you that question of like, what did you guys speak about on the round? Yeah. You can turn that around and just be like, on a day like this, I can understand that Rory's in his own head, so there's not a lot of conversation. To just go out and be like, "Oh, he didn't speak to me, he wouldn't talk to me," is very... Yeah, there's some nuance there. Yeah. It all builds up to a fantastic Ryder Cup at the end of the year. Yeah. And major season is going to be so good, because I know you said it on the group. It could be, not putting this out there, and it doesn't have to be like he's already a great, but it could be the start of something special for Rory.
Look, big point. My big point is, and I think particularly the British Open, it's back in Northern Ireland. Rory traditionally performs very, very well on British soil. I believe that he's going to go on to win 10 plus majors now. And the reason I say this is because you can make the argument of, that's it now. He's done it, and that's the wind out the sails. And can he pick himself up again? But I think with Rory being the type of golfer he is, the type of personality, how hard he works. The sound at some point, in good English, fucks out. That's going to happen now, and we're going to sound like we're on a toilet, but please bear with us. Everything we say is very interesting. You know, a guy for form, you know, in the gym, off the course, having come through all the hardships on a personal level as well, to now get to a point where he's got his family, he seems to have sorted things out with his wife. Now he's done the career Grand Slam. I think his wings are well and truly spread now.
Yeah. Yesterday in the match, when they were approaching the first tee, the commentators were making note of the fact that Bryson sort of waited a little bit longer before going onto the tee, sort of making a dramatic entrance, getting the crowd riled up, and he seems to really thrive off of that. Whereas Rory over the entire weekend and also before the cut was sort of quite quiet, didn't try and celebrate any of his eagles or birdies too much, just a little fist pump, but pretty managing his emotions. Do you think with the Ryder Cup happening in Ireland, that then Bryson completely he won't be able to compete because he just doesn't have enough of a fan base?
No, the next Ryder Cup is in America first.
In New York.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Open. The Open is in.
The Open is in
Championship.
But I honestly think Rory was so nervous, which is what he said afterwards, that I think the guy was in a tunnel. Not that I think he is that kind of a person, but I think this dude was just, the amount of pressure for this guy, going in, what was he, 2 shots ahead, going into the final day. He was everyone's favorite, sort of being okay, this is going to be the year. And he knows that if he doesn't do it that day, he's just going to become known as the biggest choker on the face of the earth. And Bryson could sort of go in there as, there's not much expectation on Bryson. You know, he's a live guy who's doing really well. And I think he'll win probably another 2 or 3 majors because he is a really good golfer. But there's not that same sort of that narrative about him, you know? Rory hadn't won one in 11 years. The Masters is the only one missing. Chances are getting fewer and fewer. So I think plays right into Bryson's hand that sort of final day. But then it was just probably got ahead of him, that whole emotional thing. You still have to play well. You can create all this narrative and scenario.
The thing is, at the Masters, it's not really it's not a nation-based thing. So even though it's in America, obviously you're going to have a lot of American fans, but Rory is still a massive household name, so you're going to have fans either way. And you kind of felt depending on who was leading the scoreboard, the crowd was behind him. So it's not based off of personality, but rather who's playing well. And as soon as Bryson wasn't playing well, you lose the crowd, and then he's lost his sort of ace in his hand.
A couple of points though. There was from early on in the day, from what I heard, was that Rory was the favorite on the course, even amongst the patrons. But he was definitely, people wanted him, they wanted to see something historic. I think obviously at the end of the day, if an American wins, they're stoked. Brilliant, all good. That's the first point. And the second point, I think, is with Rory being so quiet and being so withdrawn, I think it is so crazy to have the career that he's had and have this last piece of this puzzle to stop people questioning you.
Yeah.
Because he's had an incredible 11 years, even since he lost his major win. And I think that's the key. I just think it's such a weird thing to feel as a human being, to have the success, to play at the level he's played at, and still have a question mark over your head, only because people believe you should be doing more, which is incredible. And then the last thing is, I think, with DeChambeau as well, I worry sometimes for him to a certain degree, is that, sometimes sportsmen and even people tend to develop reputations over time. He's now become the reputation of the people's champ. That over time you act in a way to live up to that reputation, as opposed to it being your natural form. I don't think yesterday was the day, as you said. Yesterday was not the day that Bryson was going to be the people's champ. Because the Rory story was too big. The spectacle was too big. The game is bigger than any person, and yesterday was so significant in the game of golf and the history of golf, that his showmanship, everything about that, even if he had won, he would have not gotten that. And I think sometimes you have to be switched on to that. And I don't know if that, and this is being hypercritical, but I don't know if that also, as soon as he started to wobble, the lack of feedback from the crowd, or his own expectation on what he thought the crowd might give him, kind of aided him falling flat and fizzling out.
So the big story coming out of yesterday would have, win or lose, would have been about Rory, either about him choked again or him winning.
I think that's right, and I think you definitely see it online, and you saw it with everyone there at the end. There's no one, I think, who didn't enjoy watching Rory win that. I think even Rory haters, people who bet against him, people who don't like him, everyone saw the magnitude of what that meant in a sporting context. It was like when Tiger won again in 2019. It was just like, wow, that's just amazing for sport.
And I think that separates the greats from. It does. It separates the greats from the good.
Yeah. Can I ask just, I don't know how much longer we want to talk about this, but I just wanted to ask, because you brought it up in the beginning, a lot of the stuff that makes the Masters great can sometimes be argued as almost over traditional, in some aspects would be keeping it back. Klaus and I discussed this yesterday. Things like no cell phones allowed on the course, the fact that they give the TV, they don't sell the TV rights, they just sort of give it out, and that's why they can control so much of the narrative. The food and beverage is so cheap on the course, and it's all just sort of made towards it being this traditional event. Do you think other majors or other events should follow suit, especially with the no phones on the course thing? Because I've heard so much of people being it's so intense and it's so special to play there, to be there, because everyone's so locked in, and you ask yourself, why not?
I mean, maybe this shows our age, but I would say yes.
Get rid of those devices.
Dude, I mean, it's like going to a concert and there's 15,000 phones in front of you.
Yeah.
You can't even see the artist. So I think there is something to be said for it. I think people are zoned in and locked in, instead of having a phone in the air, you've got double fists in the air celebrating with the moment, with the occasion. So yes, I do think it makes it more of a special occasion. It's also very unique to then be there, because it's not being shared online instantly.
Absolutely.
Obviously, broadcasting, of course, is sharing it, but it's not this unique, authentic perspective from every individual.
Well, look at the whole scoreboard element of it as well.
That's so good.
The fact that they only have the traditional scoreboards that get changed, and that no one has access to any other scoring.
You don't know what any scores are.
And I think that, I think holistically it has to make a lot of sense, and I think the Masters does, because of the way it's always been set up. I think something like the Open can definitely get away with it more so than I think the US Open and PGA Championship, also because of commercial reasons. I think the Open and the Masters as standalone sort of tradition, everything, I think they can carry it themselves like that. But I do think within the context of sort of the very over commercialized American side of the US Open and the PGA, looking to generate as much funds and hype and stuff as possible, I think the social media side of it is just too big.
I'd love to see it, because I thought it was special, and like you said, the scoreboard moments when the fans would see the scoreboards change and stuff were special.
I think they just got it down to the whole experience holistically is just so well done.
See if we can get out there one day.
Very exciting.
To play.
The only thing that I found weird, and I talked about it with Maxi last night about feeling a little bit guilty, was when they're sitting in the, what are they called, in the
some cabin.
The cabin,
cabin. That whole conversation that happened there with Scotty sitting there not saying a single word, that just felt like an inauguration to some weird.
Klaus and I were joking that it's like from Finding Nemo, where it's like, you must jump through the ring of fire. Wow.
I don't want to bash the guy, but I also, Scotty seemed very awkward, and it seemed like he didn't want to be there. And I don't think Scotty's the type of guy that can hide it.
But it's often, I think, like that, because I know the years before, it's a weird thing, because you're there to compete as well. And in the case of Scotty, this year, he didn't do that badly.
He had a good week,
But now you're sitting there, and they're talking across you. The interviewer is talking across you to Rory, and it's obviously you're blowing this guy up. He's the greatest thing that's ever lived. You're saying, you've got your career Grand Slam, you're the greatest, and you're sitting there as like the best golfer in the world currently, and you're sort of like,
that sucks.
he's gonna go home.
True. That's weird, but I think it's with traditions. It's and I think also as you said, I think the element of someone like that you competed against handing you essentially the trophies of it.
Like that though. Like that.
But I just found it weird in the cabin.
Yeah.
Do it outside in front.
I think we've seen it for 20 years now. It's just it's normal.
Yeah.
Anyway, one little last thing that I wanted to mention. It was 20 years ago that Tiger Woods shot that chip shot that then popped on the lip
2005
and dropped in. 20 years ago.
That's crazy.
Wild, yeah. Such a long time ago.
Still one of the. That's also where broadcasting again comes into it, because even that yesterday was very well done. There's a lot to be said about broadcasters who know when to talk, know what to say, and know when to just let the moment pass. And there was a point where Klaus and I thought that the broadcasters had left. Yeah. Because once Rory had won and was walking off the green, they didn't say anything.
Yeah, just let it happen.
And just let him let that whole moment happen. And
that's what just heard his audio.
In 2005, I think it was Jim Nance, because he's been around forever, but he was the one who's, in your life, have you seen anything like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, good. Well, I think that's it. We'll quick honorary mention of the F1, Piastri winning again. I think we've spoken enough about the Masters. We'll give it the stage. But Piastri winning, a slight element of what we said coming true in the fact that the two McLaren drivers kind of winning a lot of races. Let's see how that plays out. Maybe what we sort of foresaw might come true, and we head down the stretch, and they have to start trying to understand who the big man is.
Very, very interesting race actually yesterday. The surface of that track hasn't been resurfaced in 20 years, so a stark comparison to what happened to the stark comparison to what happened in Suzuka with the new.
Who was that? That's pothole-ridden track in the Kruger Park
with all those lines on the fringe. So lots of tire degradation, meaning lots of stops, and then also a safety car that had to come up because there's a lot of debris on the track. One of the interesting things is that Lando Norris was trying to fiddle with his clutch or something like that, trying to find first gear, and his car accidentally landed forward in the on the grid. So he actually had one of his tires, I think it was like a centimeter over the line for a second penalty, and that would have meant he would have been second or even competing for first.
Mustn't fiddle the clutch through.
Yeah, that was
generally don't fiddle. Fiddling is
never good.
No,
especially when you're there on the starting grid. Just leave it.
Max was obviously the number one guy to pick it up. He's like, wait, Lando's over the line.
Do you think Max was like a little bit of like a
tattletale?
Yeah, I can see that.
100%. But Max had a terrible race.
Stephanie sat like just in front of the teacher.
Yeah. Max had a terrible race. The car, he's like, both him and Tsunoda are really struggling with the car, so it's interesting.
Footage coming out after the race as well of Max Verstappen's agent speaking to the team principal of Red Bull in the hotel. Well, not speaking, heated, shouting at each other in the lobby of a hotel.
Christian Warner?
No, the other German guy. That's part of
Helmut Marko.
Yeah. Them shouting at each other in the lobby of the hotel in Bahrain. That got someone caught that on camera, so.
It's just like good vibes at that team currently. So very interesting. As Dom said, the McLarens are currently running away with it a bit. So it's going to be nice to see what happens in Saudi Arabia next week. Another big one. And currently...
What's going on at Ferrari? I saw Lewis wasn't happy. He sort of ignored the shake of Bahrain, walking past him, didn't give him the handshake. Is it because the guy isn't repaving the road or what?
I don't know. He actually had a couple of good stints, and even overtaken Lando Norris at a stage.
Okay.
But then they kept on going with weird tire decisions. They decided to go into a hard tire. It's just like classic strategy mishaps happening.
You wouldn't be surprised if one time they're like, okay, we're going to try something new. We're going to put a different compound on each of your wheels, and you're going to go out with a medium, a soft, a hard, and a rain tire,
just to see if your car maybe rotates better.
If it looks like a tire and it sounds like a tire, it probably is a tire.
Yeah, so that's what happened then.
Lovely stuff. Should we wrap it up?
There you go. check out all the rest of the episodes coming this week still. You got football, rugby still left, and then of course, what a week to end the week. So
I think what a week is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
All right.
Goodbye. Bye.